But I'm just ecstatic because it feels like calling in almost to a radio show where it's like, long time listener, first time caller.
Right.
Welcome to Sandbox and Chill, your interview podcast where I, Gravity Fail, interview a few of my favorite tabletop RPG content creators. This week we are joined by AJ Pickett, the internet's in-depth, open-source lore master, who covers characters, playable races, ecologies, and others across the tabletop RPG multiverse. So sit back and open those ear holes. Let's begin. Like, of the people who, whenever someone's like, oh, what do you do when you're prepping for your games? I'm like, I listen to AJ, I listen to Mr. Rex, and then if I need like different stuff, then it's like Matt Colville or other creators. And I'm like, those are my go-to. Like, if you want to like prep a D&D game, or not even D&D anymore, but like a tabletop game, go there. Start there.
Yeah. There's go-tos. There's Nate from WSD20 who does his mapping and stuff like that. You got Hankerin, Ferndale, who does sort of alternate game design, and his concepts and stuff for encounter designs have inspired me a lot of the way. You got Dungeon Dad and Jordan and I and Mr. Rex, who basically all do the same sort of thing. We've got a lot of like new people coming up and doing the same sort of stuff that we've done.
Yeah.
But we all stand on each other's shoulder. Like I sort of was inspired by DM Scotty because I started off as a crafting channel,
Right.
doing dungeon terrain and miniatures and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do sculpture, as you can see on my microphone here.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that I like to go to is Black Magic Crafting, which I forget where he's at, but he does just wonderful sets. And he's
Jeremy's in Canada.
Yeah, and sometimes he's just like, yeah, just find some garbage and let's make a terrain or setting and see what we can do.
Yeah, those guys kind of left me behind because they all sort of gravitated towards building materials using crafting foam core stuff.
Yeah.
We don't have that sort of insulation material in New Zealand, so I was sort of left behind. But I've always done this sort of stuff with because I do a lot of home games and don't travel around much.
Yeah.
I just print out bits of paper and stick them together, and it makes you don't have to paint it or anything. It's so easy.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite little cheats I like to do too, is if I have cardstock, I can use cardstock paper and then fold it and it stays pretty rigid. The only problem is if you try and put something on it, then you need to put some supports in.
Yeah. And the other option, of course, which is everybody on this bandwagon, is 3D printing. So
yeah.
My little 3D printed tree.
I purposely am trying not to buy a 3D printer because I know that I'll just nonstop. It'll run in my office all day, printing various things.
Yeah, making fumes and stuff. I've used a filament printer for a long time, but the resin printers are so much better. Just the quality of stuff that you can do. Like this one here is a filament one, and I think this is like my pride and joy just because of the details of the leaves and stuff. It's so hard to do this using paper. And sculpting trees and stuff is really boring, doing all the leaves and stuff, unless you've got some sort of texture maker. But
right. I forget who it was, but it was a teacher that I used to follow, and when he made trees, he would literally take the lint from the dryer and then sculpt it into his leaves, or like if he had thatched roofs, and just look like listening to the kids, because he was the teacher and he was helping the kids run their own podcast effectively and teach them how to do it as a class, and they're just like, how do you do this? And he's like, I can show you. It's bring a lint from your dryer tomorrow.
One of the little techniques, which is like my secret weapon, is you get a piece of plaster of Paris and you get a pin and you scratch a human figurine stick figure into it. And you vary the depth of the scratching that you do to give you the features. Then you get a bit of a 2-part epoxy putty, press that into it until it sets, and then you carve the impression off like a bas relief. And that makes a tiny, weeny little miniature that you could never like sculpt with your huge big fingers. But I've made like miniature fairies that are at 2 scale on a 28mm things. Yeah, and just like carved out, like chopped off bits of plastic from drinking straws. Hard to get plastic drinking straws these days. And made the wings and stuff, and made sprays of fairies around these trees and things. And people are just like, how did you do that? It's like
Oh man,
secrets of the pros.
that's right up my alley because I love doing things that are tedious and time consuming. On one of my last edit that's currently rendering, actually I should pause it so that it doesn't crash anything while we're talking. Just some of the edits on there because of the tool I was using just was a lot of manual like resizing. So it's like we're gonna zoom in manually and then go out manually because the effect that the program had I did not like versus just
Right.
like manually changing it.
Yeah. In my latest videos, there's this new technique on Midjourney where you can zoom out from an image.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was I zoomed out and zoomed out and zoomed out and zoomed out from an image. And then when the video plays, I'm using the pan and zoom tool to zoom in on the image. And once it gets to the exact size of the next image down, flip to that image, zoom in on that one, flip to the next image, zoom in on that one. So you got this infinite zoom focused effect, which I hopefully looks really cool.
Yeah, that's one of the fun tricks that I think I actually noticed on your video and a couple others and stole it because whenever I'm watching other people's work, I'm like, how did they get that feeling of motion with a like 2D image? I'm like, oh, it's simple. It's either like zoom in, zoom out, or if you have
Hmm.
multiple effects, just have, if you have tree assets, you can move those at a slightly different pace than the background that you're zooming. And it's
Yeah.
really easy, but it makes people go, whoa.
Yeah, it's simple editing techniques that once you learn them, you sort of stick to them. I Dungeon Dad has left me in the lurch. Like
Hmm.
he's far ahead of me in his editing skills. So his videos are really much more dynamic and stuff than mine. Mine, I just hope that people listen to the voice, and
Yeah.
most people are like listening to me when they're commuting to work or sort of like a podcast sort of thing. And I just have the images sort of in the background as a montage,
Hmm.
just something to look at while you're listening.
Well, and that's what I find so interesting about like your content is when studying or looking into other people's like YouTube channels, they're all like you have to be somewhere the face, like they're either you're talking or something, a human element in there.
Mm,
Otherwise, no one's gonna watch. I'm like, yeah, but there's all these tabletop creators who don't have any people or
yeah,
talking heads or anything in it, and they have 40K plus views per episode or video that they
yeah,
put out. It's just a different.
yeah. One of my most popular videos, what I call an earner,
Mhm.
is the faiths and pantheons of the Forgotten Realms, which is faiths and clerics of the Forgotten Realms. And I noticed that there was like a big gap in fifth edition where they basically weren't telling you anything about the religious orders
Right.
and religions of Faerun, which is quite important if you're playing a cleric. And
Yeah.
also, if you're like got a city or something that's got temples and things in it, it's like, well, what do these religious outfits do? So I made a video which was basically all of the stuff that Ed Greenwood put into his book, which was a guide to.
Hmm.
It's basically just a guide to all those pantheons and faiths of the Forgotten Realms, and they're so important. Like, what does the Church of Malar do? These evil, beast worshipping guys, and they're actually quite important. Like, and if you have like an estate of like debauched nobles who hire them to bring in a beast and then
Hmm.
have a hunt, like as some sort of a
Yeah.
garden party thing, and then it gets out of hand, and the thing like jumps a fence and goes and kills some villagers, gets hushed up because
Yeah.
blame it on the Church of Malar, and ostensibly they're an evil outfit, but they're also handy to have them in the outskirts of your city.
Hmm.
So if there's an invading army, they have to get through this forest full of rampaging monsters
Hmm.
that the Malarites have put in there for. Anyway, so over time, that video's earned me like just from people coming in and watching it and watching
Hmm.
and watching. They'll click on a certain timestamp for the specific religion of their cleric that they're looking for, and then they'll just let it play
Right.
afterwards. So it's really good revenue for me. But it's just me talking and then just images of different clerics and
Hmm.
faiths and stuff like that going in the background. You don't see my face at all.
Yeah. That
Uh,
when I was watching one of your live streams, that was actually one of the questions that I kind of wanted like your opinion on combined with now that you're also writing more of your own content, your view of putting it in to your content. Because, yeah, fifth edition very lightly addresses any kind of religion in their
Mm.
books and supplements. And if anything, fifth edition has really shied away from it. You're,
Yeah, with good reason. I can see
yeah,
why. I mean, whenever I bring it up in my videos, I get a lot of stuff in the comments.
yeah, that was going to be my question is why do you think that they do it? And how would you incorporate it into your own, like, because you're making your own content. So how would you,
Mhm.
or how much would you put into your own?
I haven't really covered in the setting that I'm making at the moment. It's really just driven by the adventures that I'm writing, and I'm expanding the world organically as I write the adventures. So
Hmm.
I'm writing a big list of 1,000 people that you can find, shops, and the people who live in them for the city of Gakligand, in this place called the Midlands, which is I thought it's a it, I want a nice, fresh, young sort of fantasy world where humans are like a new thing.
Yeah.
They haven't got like it's almost the opposite of the Forgotten Realms. This is the new realm,
Hmm.
and the humans have got a history going back like only a couple of thousand years, kind of like ours. You know,
Yeah.
our history is kind of fresh, and the elves and the dwarves are really ancient, and don't have a lot to do with them. They don't live in the same like they don't live in this human cities, and the humans don't interact with the elven places and the dwarven places
Hmm.
because why would you? You know, you stay out of their business, they stay out of yours, and
Yeah.
you keep nice sort of nice relations going. There's occasional shopkeepers and stuff like that, but they don't really gel very well with the human population because humans are loud, aggressive,
Yeah.
tricksy, double crossing, greedy, um, domineering,
Hmm.
all these negative traits
Right.
that we don't really address about humans. But the dwarves and the elves will be like, oh, those humans, man, you know. And also, and you've got hobbits and gnomes and stuff because I'm not restricted to calling them hobbits in my own
Right.
world setting. And the um, the religions and things like that, I haven't really touched on yet because I haven't really gone into those cultures.
Hmm.
It's just been a band of adventurers, and they've been out in the wilderness, and now they're sort of encroaching into the human-dominated lands. And the human-dominated lands are first you sort of establish the law and order and the authority, and then the sort of day-to-day life.
Hmm.
And then once you get more involved in um, the because they're building themselves up as becoming part of civilization as heroes and guys of renown who have done stuff. Before they were just a bunch of guys who were traveling through the wilderness on the east coast, way away from like human
Yeah.
stuff going on. And there was like these boulder folk and these trolls and all this sort of stuff going on. And now they're in Gakligand in the Midlands, and the Midlands is human settlements and horse ranches and a great city and lots of settlements around it. And I'm sort of expanding and saying, okay, there's stuff going on over to the south, and the south is sort of exotic and cool.
Hmm.
The north is cold and tough people.
Hmm.
No idea what's going on the west. The east is largely blocked off by a mountain chain and a big dense forest. But the forest is interesting because no elves live there because the forest is creepy and evil,
Right. Yeah.
sort of thing. And the mountain chain has got this massive, big, nasty dragon on there who's been domineering it for so long that he's kind of kept all the other dragons in check. But the player characters possibly killed that dragon and caused a volcano to erupt in the last adventure. So we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't really got around to the religions and
Hmm.
stuff yet, but I think they're going to be fairly simple, like a possibly one of the things with like multi-theistic, like pantheistic
Hmm.
um, religions, which you have very commonly in Dungeons and Dragons games, which is interesting. You don't really have a lot of monotheistic
Right.
cultures in D&D. Um, because it's escapism, I guess,
Yeah.
is that the clerics aren't pantheistic themselves. They're monotheistic in their outlook.
Yeah.
And that seems strange to me. And it also seems strange in the context of the Forgotten Realms, where if you're doing something, you pay homage to whatever god is involved in that in their shrines and stuff. And that would be normal for any non-cleric to do, is not have one particular religion that you're fighter or ranger is devoted to, because it's a pantheistic world.
I might be misremembering it, but it honestly might have been you who mentioned like making a cleric that's similar to the one guy in the Mummy movie who has multiple like necklaces
Yeah,
to
yeah,
various religions and knows enough
exactly.
about different things to be like, I'm effectively like a level one cleric in Ilmater. I'm a level one cleric in whatever. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There should be like a generic pantheistic faith, or pantheistic church where
yeah.
you can go and worship any particular god. And all of the gods have got an agreement that we
I'm
don't involve our business with this particular place.
I mean, that's ripe content that if someone's listening could just take, because the only thing I would build off that is depending on however you're attuned that day and whatever god, you have like a roll table or something of features you can get from that god that's different than another one. So you're worshiping, or you call out to Poseidon for your cleric, you get a water feature. You call out
Yeah,
to Artemis, you get a hunting feature or something. Someone,
yeah.
if if it's for me, you quote me, you can steal it. If you get to it before I
Um,
do. Yeah.
One of the really interesting things about when I run games and when there's clerics, and why I like playing clerics and
Mm-hmm.
why the wisdom stat is high for clerics, is that wisdom is your observation of your environment.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be a stupid person, but seem very smart because you can see stuff going on. It's like Sherlock Holmes is both intelligent and he's got a really high wisdom score,
Right.
so he can say, okay, this cigar butt was chewed on the left hand side, so this person's got dental problems.
Mm-hmm.
He obviously lives in East Auckland. So it's like, what? It's like because they make sawdust with their bread.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows stuff and he's observing stuff very carefully. A cleric has got a high wisdom score because they are observing signs and portents of their gods around them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they are looking for the yellow winged butterfly, which is a symbol of this particular religion.
Right.
But if you don't have information like that in your game, how do you know?
Yeah.
The player doesn't know what to look for.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I sort of packed into that video was the symbols of this particular god are this thing, that thing, and this thing. Like they have
Mm-hmm.
a favorite weapon, they've got a favorite color, they've got a particular style of symbol that they use. Like
Right.
certain gods will have, animals or flowers. Others will be symbols and flames and things like that. And you look at say Game of Thrones, for instance, and that fire god,
Yeah.
and you know that it's bad, but you don't know how bad it is or what it is. Is it like demonic? You don't know, but it does some pretty nasty things. But it also brings people back from the dead
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
interesting. You don't really know enough about it. You just see the signs and the portents that those people do. You
Yeah.
don't get any wider context from it. And I think that as a player character is how you should approach it as well. Don't over explain it. Make
Yeah.
it mysterious and weird and supernatural. Um, so yeah. So that cleric is, and the benefit of that as a cleric is that because you're seeing things and you're so attuned to your environment, you're also attuned to what people are doing. So you're secretly rolling for that guy and saying, okay, um, he not only can you see what's going on with like the influence of the supernatural in this environment, but you also, as a side effect, know what the NPCs around you are thinking and feeling and doing, and like little subtle symbols they do,
Mm-hmm.
and that gravitates to them knowing more stuff about what's going on in any given situation. Other player characters gravitate towards them and to ask them what's going on, so they elevate naturally to a leadership
Mm-hmm.
position in the party. So the cleric is really calling the shots organically
Right.
all the time in player groups, which people don't generally. They usually are like, oh, it's the fighter or the strongest. It's like, no, it's the most observant person in the
Right.
group who will be telling everybody what's going on.
And that's where that old cliche of like knowledge is power comes in. The
Yeah,
person who either seeing the most or knows the most helps
yeah,
dictate to the rest of the party because they're the ones who are interpreting the world for the players,
yeah.
or the rest of them.
So if you're the DM, be handing that cleric all the notes and stuff like that going on, and everybody be like, man, I'm going to play the healer next time because that's cool. You get
Which,
all the information.
speaking of notes, I know that you use Dragon Magazine and you've talked about being kind of an internet sleuth and
Hmm.
pirater of content to
Oh yeah.
gain. What's your go to when you're researching for videos?
Well, the huge stock of PDFs I have from all over the place, of
Hmm.
course. Sources shall remain anonymous. The Internet Archive actually is one of the best places for looking up stuff, because there's old websites and things which are no longer around. There's old dubious sources which are still replicated on the Internet Archive. I'm probably going to get in trouble for a tweet that I just made, which is I just said you can play online for free completely, D&D, and linked to all of these resources that yeah, including a lot of official books for Dungeons and
Hmm.
Dragons, which you can just read for free on the
Yeah.
internet. Literally don't have to buy anything. Um,
Yeah, there's a couple
but
sites
yeah,
I like that have free books that I will not mention
yeah,
here because
yeah,
they'll be on YouTube, but they're out there
yeah.
and they're not hard to
Oh yeah,
find. Yeah,
they're not hard to find at all.
yeah.
And there's websites where people have done all the legwork for me, like the Forgotten Realms Wiki is absolutely amazing.
Hmm.
And also there's a site called Dragon Dex, which has got an index of all of the articles from Dragon Magazine,
Hmm.
which is really, really handy if
That's
you're looking for
helpful.
stuff.
Yeah.
You can just type in like how many types of yellow dragon are there, and it's like, oh, there's been 3 different types of yellow dragon in Dragon Magazine official sources. Most of the D&D wiki, not the D&D wiki, that's terrible, but the Forgotten Realms wiki
Yeah.
has got a lot of really good references for which books things are found in, and then you can go there and double check everything, because sometimes there's big discrepancies in articles and stuff like that where people have assumed something's in a magazine or something and it's not when you actually get to it. Like there was one monster that was described in the letters section of a Dragon magazine and wasn't actually an article, so it had
Hmm.
me very confused for ages. And when the whole OGL drama happened, I was looking for the origin of quite a few iconic monsters and seeing what legal ownership
Right.
Wizard of the Coast actually has.
Did you know that Ampersandbox and Gravity Fail have created Patreons with additional content for your reading and viewing pleasure? Joining our Patreon will grant you early access to videos and additional content. This is the first place Ampersandbox and Gravity Fail will post their notes, NPCs, and other content. If you want to support the channel, then check out our Patreons. Now back to the show. Not a lot.
Not a lot at
Yeah.
all. Like it was very, very common. I talked to Tim Kask about this. It was very common back in the day that they just had first use
Right.
contracts, which means that if somebody's written a thing, an article or a monster or something like that, they've sent it into the publisher, and the publisher back in the day was kind of cowboy like
Hmm.
TSR was. They just give them a contract saying, oh, we'll just publish it first, and then after that you can publish it wherever you want, put it in a book or whatever.
Right.
That was the majority, and sometimes not even that. Like, for instance, the land shark, the boulet,
Hmm.
is still owned entirely by Tim Kask. He never signed a contract for that at all. So every single time Wizard of the Coast uses the boulet, they should be paying him money, essentially. And at any point, he could contest it. He's not interested in contesting it at all, but he could
Right. Right.
completely claim ownership and sue them for all they're worth. But yeah, so that's why they've released a lot of stuff into the public domain, because they had no right to it in the first place.
Well, and that's the
Um,
interesting part with the whole OGL is there's a lot at any point we could get into about the start of it and so on, but it's definitely it's that saying where it's like now there's blood in the water a little bit for Wizards of the Coast. Like here's this or perceivably a monolithic entity that decided to stab itself for in hopes of regrowing 2 heads. I guess they thought they were a Hydra and they're not.
yeah, no, it turns out that the content creators are Hydra. In fact, that was
Yeah.
one of our secret little phrase that we were using was "Hail Hydra." If they go after any one of us, 3 more will rise from Discord.
Yeah, because
And we were called.
you even mentioned that on one of your live streams where it's like the amount of people creating their own systems now and their own lore just skyrocketed because of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they literally created their own competition. It's like back in the day, TSR created Games Workshop,
Hmm.
essentially. The Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston, they were making their own choose your own adventure books and stuff, and there was a thriving community of people playing D&D in the UK, but it was too expensive to export stuff out there. from the States. So they wanted to make a publishing and manufacturing arm for miniatures and books and stuff in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And they were only too happy to do that. And then at the last minute, for some reason, Gary decided to go with, I think it was Grenadier Miniatures, or something like that, and left the Games Workshop in the lurch. And so they were like, well, okay, we're all set up to make miniatures and fantasy games, so let's make Warhammer Fantasy instead. And they did. And then that became Warhammer 40k, and the rest is history. So, one of the things I wish there was like parallel dimensions where I could go and check in, and where Games Workshop bought TSR.
Yeah.
Would have been an interesting situation.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Or if the one I was curious about, just because it's newer and I don't have as much history knowledge, it's one that I go to your channel for. But what if they succeeded in their OGL conquest too? Like how different these last 6 months would have been.
Oh, it would have been crazy. So they have an agenda. They haven't deviated from their agenda one bit, and that is to go fully digital.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more clear to everybody now that that's what their intention is, because you just look at Magic the Gathering for exactly what their model is. So, like in the early days, they put out something like 5 sets of cards a year. Now it's more like 23.
Mm-hmm.
With all of the extra stuff, it's more like 40 something different things. So it's just, you can't keep up with it. It's just crazy. So they have to go digital, and that's all tied in with, you buy a certain amount of tokens and spend those tokens on unlocking cards and things like that. So it's essentially the same techniques that casinos use.
Yeah.
They exchange money for gambling coins, chits, whatever they call them.
Yeah, the little microtransactions from like Fortnite. Yeah. Because then it also makes
microtransactions are just straight up gambling. Well, loot boxes are straight up gambling. So and the fact, like in my country, there's no restrictions for age whatsoever. I think over in Australia it's something like age of 14 or something like that, but it should have the same restrictions as casinos.
Oh yeah.
Because that's essentially what you're doing. It's gamification.
A fun fact is I work at a bank, and for a long time I would have to answer the phones for parents that are like, what are these transactions to Sony? Why do I have 50 $7.99 transactions? Like, do you have a kid or grandchild that plays Fortnite or some kind of game online? They're like, yeah, but why are they getting charged? I mean, then they're buying these things and they're addicted to it. You can't dispute it, and you can't cancel them. So go unplug the Xbox or PlayStation.
Yeah, destroy it.
Yeah.
That's your best option. Yeah, and that's essentially where we're going with D&D. So they'll have the online platform. They'll have digital versions of all the books, and you can pay extra to buy a physical copy, but they really want to get away from physical copies because they've got warehouses full of products they can't sell right now. And it's costing them money. They don't do print on demand, which they probably should have from the start. They do bulk, old school, getting lots and lots of stock, sending it out, and now they're trying to do pre-orders on all their books. But I think people have been bitten by Spelljammer and are a bit shy about going into Planescape. Like I certainly would advise people not to pre-buy anything from Wizards of the Coast.
I'm a fan of waiting till it comes out to the store, look through it, because the last several books I've not been pleased with. I was very burnt on the Icewind Dale a little bit. Like it's good. There's parts of it that are good, but the overall putting the pieces together, I was like, I have to do. I watch your videos and do a bunch of lore work to tie everything together.
Yeah, if you want some really good tie-ins, the video that I did on the Uthgard Barbarians is that was directly tied in with researching for the Dark Alliance game, which is set in the same sort of area. So the research that was put into that game is actually the research that I was doing for Took Games before it got bought out by Wizards of the Coast, and I worked with Took Games for a little while they were bought by Wizards of the Coast. The attitude of the entire relationship changed immediately as soon as Wizards of the Coast took over, and they just lumped all this creative writing on me, not law consultation, but can you write a timeline of the orcs in this area? Can you write all this stuff? And I'm just like, and then the whole bit with the crash landed upside the city underneath Kelvin's
Yeah.
Cairn and all that sort of stuff, and that got approved by Mike Mill. That was my idea, by the way.
Yeah.
That buried city. Um,
When I got to that point, I was like, "Who did this?" Because I actually thought it out. I'm
mhm.
like, "This,
Yeah,
this makes sense."
and they had this image of like a giant skeleton with a sword in it stuck to the side of the mountain, which I guess they found the image somewhere. They had some stock art, and they said, "What's this?" And I was like,
Oh man.
I don't know, like a son of Groomsh or something.
Yeah.
It's from some time when it was fighting titans, or there's no law for that whatsoever. And they're
Hmm.
like, "Can you make some?" And we're like, "Well, that's not a consultation. That's creative writing, and that requires a different contract, my friends.
Yeah.
You've got a lead writer." So yeah. And then my dad's health took a turn for the
Hmm.
worse, and I was just like, "I'm earning more money on YouTube. I don't want to deal with you people." And so I skipped.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so you don't see my name in the credits anywhere on that stuff.
If
And
yeah.
given how the game panned out in the end, I'm kind of glad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
they really underfunded it, and they did rush that game out, unfortunately, because they didn't want it competing with Baldur's Gate, I suppose.
yeah. It's kind of like movies. When you have two movies coming out at the same time, one of them will win against the other one.
Yeah, and they literally like took games quite ballsy. Actually,
Hmm.
they started making that game, and it's very much a D&D game.
Hmm.
Before they had any contract with Wizards of the Coast or approval to do it at all. So, I mean, what were they going to do if they didn't get approved? Crazy. Yeah, but they had like it was basically lots of people working from home, sort of during the COVID thing, and
Hmm.
then yeah, it all came together that way. But they really needed like another half a year and some serious resources
Yeah.
to plug in. That's, for example, why you don't have any animated Guinevere. She's just a spell effect in that game because they didn't have the budget to basically buy the software to animate a cat.
Yeah.
And because I raised this question, I was like, oh, on Kelvin's Cairn, there's crag cats,
Hmm.
and they're like, oh, we can't have cats. And I was like,
Why? Yeah.
but crag cats are
Yeah.
part. They're fundamental. Like you go up this mountain, there's these big like white mountain lion things.
Hmm.
It's like no. It's like, well, can you at least put like white fur ruffs around the goblins' necks to indicate that they've killed some crag
Yeah.
cats?
Put them
And
somewhere in the
yeah, put them
imagery.
somewhere. Yeah, and the Verbeeg design was all wrong because they just look like big humans essentially in the lore. But they made them look more like hill giants, and it's like, okay, whatever. But I was very proud of the Goblin language
Yeah.
that was developed for that game because that was mostly from Ebron.
Right.
Ebron's got much better developed Goblin language than the Forgotten Realms does.
Yeah. That was definitely something you were commenting on one of your recent within the last 4 live streams because I
Hmm.
power watched through those and I was like, oh, this is also good lore. Why?
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
those live streams can go all over the place.
yeah. Because the one thing I do notice or did notice was when researching videos and like live streams as well, and you commented on them too that when you decided to not do D&D only content that like dip in viewership,
Mm.
how much of it is from do you feel like is from just saying you're not going to cover it as much versus the, also people being dissatisfied with Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, it's much more wide scale than that.
Yeah.
So if you go to various other YouTube channels like Scalagrim and other stuff that don't do D&D content at
Hmm.
all, there's been a dip in views generally across YouTube because of YouTube Shorts. So
Hmm.
people are just blip watching shorts now. So they start watching shorts and they just get locked into it, and they are essentially not watching other content.
Yeah.
So if you don't do YouTube Shorts at the moment, your channel really suffers.
Yeah.
And I suppose I could do shorts of lore, or like talk about dimensions or planes
Hmm.
and things like that. Maybe I'll get around to it. I don't know. I was thinking about doing one on the wizard schools
Yeah.
and what different wizard professions are outside of adventuring, because that's generally interesting to people. And my character class videos are interesting because they're not mechanics. They talk about the world building
Right.
behind them. But I find them kind of arduous to do. But that was moving away from the Forgotten Realms was like people were the general feedback that I got were like, you're crazy, you're killing the golden goose, you're top of the game at this.
Yeah.
What else do we watch your channel for? And I'm just like, well, the channel is not called AJ's D&D channel.
Right.
It's called AJ. It's just my creative writing. And if I'm not interested in doing Forgotten Realms lore because I literally feel like I've been betrayed by the company,
Yeah.
then
On multiple
I'm not going to
fronts
do it.
at different
Yeah, on
times. Yeah.
multiple. Yeah, so I broke out into doing some sci-fi stuff and talking about other role-playing games
Hmm.
that I've really loved over the years. The Rifts videos did pretty well, and Palladium books. And I talked about Dragon Age and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But now I've gravitated going back to writing my own fantasy stuff.
Hmm.
And people are drifting back into the channel and watching more of that because it's more in tune with what they're used to from me.
Yeah.
Just with extra, because I'm not restricted to talking about the Forgotten Realms and the D&D cosmology, so I can really sort of expand into stuff I like from movies, like
Right.
the Fire Mares from Krull or the Warple Bunny from
That one
Monty
was
Python, and
was fun. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm having fun, and I think it comes across in the videos as well. And the I really liked doing the alien species videos because it sort of showed what else I can do when I'm
Hmm.
talking about ecologies and things like that, and xenobiology. And I was building this sort of strange cosmic universe lore as well. But that's just all on Patreon now. You can't
Yeah.
access it from my YouTube channel because it was just like, oh, well, it's not resonating with people.
Which
Some people
you have
really
a
liked it.
very reasonable Patreon that I was shocked by, because it's just, you have one tier and it's $1.
Yeah, just $1,
Yeah.
and you even get like free PDFs and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, my that was my dad's work principle. It's just like if you're selling something, keep the price low, and keep it churning. Like
Right.
sell a lot of it and
Hmm.
just keep the price reasonable, and you'll build a steady income that way. And that seems to be reasonably good for my Patreon because people just sort of stick with it because
Yeah.
it's only $1 a month or so.
It's $1 a month for
Yeah.
quality content that someone has researched before putting out, uh, instead of just churning out BS. Because I see,
Yeah.
because I know that you've also mentioned that you're not on Drive Through or DM's Guild, because that's where
No.
I see a lot of that problem, where some creator or person does like here's a class that I stole from second, third, or whatever edition. It's horribly made and did no lore for it, but it's $5 or $3, so
Yeah.
it's under five, and it hits that magic best under $5 algorithm mix.
Yeah. And you look at the like the electrum and the gold and the platinum and stuff,
Hmm.
and they put so much stock in that, and it's such a tiny amount, really.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So what I will probably do is, and also if you're publishing on the DMs Guild, you're giving up your rights to your
Yeah.
work anyway, because they basically own it.
Hmm.
Drive Through RPG, you still own it yourself, but they take a chunk of the revenue for essentially a platform that you're going to get lost in a swamp of other
Oh yeah.
titles on anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't really like the social scene of the creators on the Drive Through RPG. They're very nitpicky and aggressive.
Well, yeah,
Um,
because they know. I stopped using it a long time ago. I made one supplement called How to Train Your Companion that did really well, but the problem was, yeah, they know that if they put it in their weekly newsletter or if they tweet about it, then that thing is going to go up. So then it becomes this like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, you got to be my friend.
yeah, it's like, what do they think they are? Kickstarter?
Oh man, that's a that's a whole other thing, because I know that you're also doing a Kickstarter for
Mm.
your battle mats that are really interesting.
Yeah, last 6 days of the funding. The good news is that if the like the whole backstory behind it is I did a campaign for this a few years ago and got it funded. There was
Hmm.
a false start with that one, and then we did another one and it got funded, and we got the manufacturer sent out to everybody miraculously during the whole COVID
Hmm.
disaster happened while we were trying to ship stuff out. So the shipping costs spiraled out of control by like 300%. So I
Yeah.
had to pay for that. Essentially, I didn't make any money on it whatsoever, but everybody got their battle mats, which is the important thing. This time around, we've sorted out the manufacturing. We're going with a different manufacturer who can do them thinner. Essentially, what they are is silicone
Hmm.
battle mats, as opposed to your vinyl covered or your vinyl ones or your laminated cardboard ones that you use these days, which tend to get worn out and stain and just become landfill.
Yeah.
That was what I was trying to avoid. Is we've got a superior product that we can manufacture now that can do the job better than anything else out there. You only have to buy it once. It'll last you a lifetime, and it's got so many other uses. silicone is.
Well, you mentioned once, maybe as a joke, you could cook on it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
literally cook on it.
Yeah.
So like my kitchen has got like a lot of my test mats. One's lining the
Yeah.
bottom of my air fryer oven. And yeah, I cook pizza on my battle mats. And I line my benches and stuff like that because
Hmm.
it's just really impervious. And I do all my crafting and painting and stuff on there. I mix my epoxy resin on
Hmm.
the battle mats because it just peels off afterwards. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And of course, it takes any sort of wet dry erase marker and you just wipe it off with a wet wipe. And even permanent marker pen you can use in a pinch if you have to, but I don't recommend using it long term
Yeah.
because some of them do stain, particularly red. Don't use red.
Yeah. You have to
Um,
use like an alcohol mix to get those off.
yeah, wet wipes are
Yeah.
generally okay because they've got like a solvent on them
Hmm.
anyway. But yeah, it can be problematic with some marker pens. So always test them out on the corner. Anyway, so I got them all sorted out. The manufacturing's all sorted. We've done all the testing and everything, and it's essentially ready to go. It's the last 6 days of funding. But because we had 3 different colors of battle mat, they
Hmm.
set the minimum order quantity from the factory at
Right.
2,000.
Right.
And that was like quite a because I think in my currency it's like 77,000 to get them all manufactured, and that
Hmm.
includes all the shipping and everything as well. Because you just the price includes the shipping anywhere in the world, so they're about $7 cheaper than anything you can buy on the market at the
Yeah.
moment. And the international shipping is the same for everybody because it's really cheap because it's
Hmm.
all from one shipping company that's manufacturing stuff in Shenzhen in China, which sends out all the 3D printers and all of the tech stuff that they make in China. So they're used to shipping worldwide. So it's very, very reliable. And it's all ready to go. But we're about 15K away from fully funded, and it's like 6 days to go. So it's
Yeah.
maybe. I've talked to the company, and if we drop the least popular color, which is the parchment yellow, and just do
Hmm.
the 2 colors, we can drop the manufacturing total down to 1,000, and we'll already be funded. So
Right.
if it fails to fund on Kickstarter, I'll do another Kickstarter, or maybe just email people say,
Yeah.
"Hey, look, if you still want to back it, you can do it through PayPal. It's
Hmm.
all ready to go. Essentially, order it.
Well,
We'll get it
and
shipped
the
out to
good
you
part
in two
about like
months."
doing a PayPal or something not on Kickstarter is you avoid the taxes and fees.
Yeah, so
Uh,
I can make the product even cheaper if it's not on Kickstarter, which
exactly.
is ironic because remember the day when you used to do Kickstarters because you got a really good deal.
Yeah.
Like Bones Miniatures are still pretty good for that, but a lot of other products these days you're paying full price for it, really,
Hmm.
just like a pre-order system. It's just like
Well,
not looking at
and
you,
that's the thing that
Warden
I'm
Forge.
so curious about why certain people pick Kickstarter for their projects. Because like if it's a small project, it's like a two-parter. It's like one, you can market that you had a successful Kickstarter and whatever badge on your shirt, and then the
Yeah,
other one is like they also take 2% or I forget what it was exactly, but they take a chunk out of it plus the transaction fees when they actually
yeah.
accrue the money.
It works out to be about $1,000 or so.
Yeah.
That you're spending. Also, backer kit that everybody tends to use like a given these days.
Hmm.
They also take a chunk of money as well, but they're really good for like doing orders after the
Right.
funding period is over and doing all the logistics and stuff like that.
If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure to click the like and subscribe button to let us know what you think of the show. If there's a guest you would like to see on the podcast, then drop their name and link in the comments below. Now let's get back to it.
But I mean, you could probably do this yourself. Essentially, just have like a progress bar down the bottom of your website, and
Hmm.
it's like as many orders as come in. It's like put in your order for the product, and once it reaches the top bar here, that's our manufacturing total. Then we charge everybody and get sent out all the products.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're just filling up a container ship sort of thing,
Yeah.
container store.
I always thought it would be
Um,
funny to have like sell a shirt that is promoting whatever you're trying to do. So it's like I like this I don't know. It's kind of like the I went somewhere and survived. It's like I backed this project and survived shirt, and then 100% of whatever you would get as the creator just goes to making that new thing. And then once it comes out, it's like if you ordered a shirt, you get first dibs, and anyone else, you have to you have to wait till round two.
Hell, I mean, successful websites have been built on such ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Yeah, so yeah, the options, like even if the Kickstarter fails, the options are still there to get all the products out to
Hmm.
everybody, including like the freebie combat tracker, which is just pre-existing stock that we have that we can send out to
Yeah.
everybody. So you get the battle map, plus you get the combat tracker for free, which actually makes your savings about $20, I
Yeah.
think. So yeah, it's pretty good deal. And as I say, like the battle mats last forever. They're fantastic. They're flame proof. I've got a little video where I homebrew my own alcohol,
Hmm.
some fortified mead, which is flammable, and
Hmm.
I spread some on the battle mat in between some miniatures. I thought, I wonder if I could do like a wall of fire effect and set it on fire, and it's like, oh wow, I can. So I recorded it, and
See
just like try and beat
that
that chess,
that would be a
you know.
perfect short if you wanted to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like, wow, you can't do that with a chess X mat. There's
And
a
then
lot
you
of things you
throw,
can't do.
snow cones on it, and that's the wall of ice.
Yeah, yeah. There's other things you can do, like you can make stained glass effects by just having like you get the epoxy putty and you make a framework out of it. Then you
Hmm.
get tinted epoxy resin and you paint it on with a toothpick and make a stained glass effect. And once it sets, you just peel it off the
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic. And like I can't stress enough how good that looks as like a cathedral, a ruined cathedral with a broken stained glass window. Like
Yeah.
Warhammer fans, you don't know what you're missing.
Oh man, now I just want to pull out my hot wire cutter and start making things.
Yeah.
um, so part of it, like, what is some of the limitations since maybe not everyone's aware that you live in kiwi avocado country, out,
Hmm.
pretty far
Yeah.
away. What are some of the limitations with like that you have for this hobby since you live kind of outside where most people?
Shipping, of course,
Yeah.
makes everything very expensive. Like the books that you pay $40 for, we pay $80 for. So it's like add on $40 shipping for everything that you get sent out here. So that's a pain in the ass. The lack of population playing games
Hmm.
means that we don't have like conventions and stuff at the same scale. Like we have, there's local sort of conventions where you'll have one, like the city of Hamilton, which I'm closest to, has a convention coming up soon, actually, called Convergence. But there'll be like 6 or 7 tables of people playing games,
Hmm.
and maybe 50 people there. That's a big convention.
Yeah.
And then we've got major ones like Armageddon, but that's mostly the entire gaming industry, including like people selling plushies and fake swords,
Yeah.
and movie industry people there, and all that sort of stuff is all combined into one thing. So we have the occasional stars and things that come through. Got one hilarious story about the poor guys from Percy Jackson Lightning Thief.
The
So
actors or crew or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the actors. So
Yeah.
we had the guy who plays Tilk and another couple of actors from Stargate
Oh yeah.
SG-1 that just did a panel,
He
and we had the entire
he
audience sitting
graduated from
there.
my same university
Really,
because we
he's
both went to
great
U
guy.
of O. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's sitting there, and we've got this panel. It was a really good panel, and all the audience is sitting there and like getting engaged and everything. And then the organizer says, "Okay, now it's time for the Percy Jackson Lightning Thief actors." They came trotting onto stage immediately, and from their perspective, they came in and sat down at the table, and half of the audience got up and left because we weren't interested. We weren't interested in that. I was just like, "Oh, that is brutal,"
Oh
and they
man.
were just like, "Yeah." So yeah, not great. That was the organizers' fault. They should have given them a good like 15 minutes grace, for all the little kids to come in and sit down. But
Yeah.
yeah, all the adults that were there were not interested in that movie at all. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be rough. Oh.
Yeah. Kiwis pull no punches.
No. Yeah.
uh,
Well, and
yeah.
that's the cultural things that I find really interesting and fun to talk to people about from different areas, and that's part of the reason I like doing this kind of like interview podcast. Is everywhere thinks that their way is like the standard or customary, but as very few people will be like, well, here we do it this way,
Mm.
and we know that that's not how somewhere else does it. Um, uh, but that's where I'm interested in like your perception of like your regional tabletop RPG community and building and perception versus what you see, not necessarily Wizards of the Coast, but like American tabletop space.
Well, the really interesting thing is I haven't yet gone to a Gen Con, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, or a game hole, or I've been to PAX in Australia, but not a PAX in America or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. So the last time I was in America was like 1990. It was the LA riots. I was at the LA riots.
A while, yeah.
That's been a long time, yeah. So I was really keen to get over there, but every single time I planned to go there, like COVID happened, or the OGL disaster and shorts have chopped everybody's income in
Mm-hmm.
half. So it's like really difficult. But I really want to get over there and get to a Gen Con. So the perspective for me, I'm completely unknown in New Zealand, like
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows who I am. Only recently, some people were organizing like a Kiwi RPG sort of organization convention circuit type thing. Um, and they looked up published people who have been published in New Zealand and various magazines and stuff. And it turns out that my article that I got published in the Rifter for Palladium Books, that was Rifter number 23 with a Blade Mage article, was one of the first Kiwis who was ever published in an RPG
Mm-hmm.
magazine. And I had no idea that I'd set some sort of precedent back then. But yeah, that makes me like the old school first generation publishers
Mm-hmm.
in the gaming industry in New Zealand who have been doing it like a job. And you can count the number of YouTubers who do it full time in New Zealand on your hand, pretty
Yeah.
much. It's just unknown. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, "You do what?" It's like, "Is that even possible that you do this for a full time job?" I'm like, "Yeah." So, but so the perspective of me going to a gaming convention in Australia or New Zealand and like having to tell people what I do,
Mm-hmm.
whereas if I went to Gen Con, so many people would know who I am and what I
Right.
do. It would be a complete and utter culture shock for me because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not recognized at all where I come from. So if I went to Gen Con and I had people coming up and saying, "AJ, I've
Yeah.
been watching your channel for years," it'd be like, very, very Twilight Zone for me, indeed. Yeah.
But are there any with that? Are there any like play style or storytelling differences between New Zealand
Yeah.
and America that you
Yeah.
see?
So in my we have a lot of small town groups that have been playing together for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and not many people move around from gaming group to gaming group because there's just not a large population of people playing.
Mm-hmm.
So you tend to stick with the people that you're with and sort out your personal problems. Like the whole idea of like I've got a problem table, so just leave sort of thing
Yeah.
doesn't really apply. So you need to sort out your problems. And one of the things I quite often stress in my videos is you don't have a gaming problem, you've got a friendship problem.
Yeah.
And no amount of gaming advice is going to fix your personality problem with that person at the table. So you need to actually put the game aside and talk to the person about their behavior or your relationship. Do something else
Mm-hmm.
for an evening and, get rid of the whole gaming mechanics side of things. And yeah, that quite often works. Just don't go to the internet and ask about, "Oh, I've got this problem person at my table." It's just like, yeah, you've got a problem person in your life.
Yeah.
Sort it out.
Yeah.
We're not a relationship counseling service. No amount of
Some
rules
some
mechanics is
players
gonna.
oh, some
Yeah,
players treat that was one I had to talk to a player about who was using our game as their counseling session. I had to, like you said, kind of like sit them down like, "Hey, so everyone's kind of uncomfortable."
yeah,
And
yeah.
we're very
If
aware it's
the
personal things coming into the
if the
gameplay.
friendship is good and if the person's mental state is healthy, the rules of the game don't really matter as much.
Yeah.
So there's a nice sweet spot there, and the reason why role playing games I find are so good for forming friendships is it makes a nice known quantity where you can socially interact with somebody within the confines and restrictions of the game that make getting to know that person and being friends with that person so much easier. So all of my best friends I got from role playing
Yeah.
games. I find it very hard to form friendships outside of work or role playing games.
Yeah.
Or I don't really do sports, so you know,
Yeah, and it helps make the social interactions more of a level playing field. Because
yeah,
even if you have someone who is a hardcore RP person, okay, cool. We still have combat to do.
Mm, yeah.
And that
So
combat
if you think
person,
about it,
yeah,
role-playing games are intellectual sports.
yeah,
So really, we're just sitting down and we're enjoying a brain sport
mm-hmm.
and competing, kind of, but also, really enjoying the whole process of
Yeah.
just being on our mental sport field. But it's an imaginary one. So yeah, we're brain jocks, really.
Now I'm just getting the image of like 5 people sitting around a circle, wearing like Matrix style hoods, just thinking really
Yeah,
intently.
that's the future that Wizard of the Coast wants.
Yeah, honestly, because I don't know if you've seen it, but I've mentioned it before. But Joe Manganiello has like his own AR system that he's trying
Hmm.
to push. So you could theoretically put that in combination with like Oculus or something else, or your phone and the
Yep.
Google box thing that you wear on your face.
Yes, I've actually backed that Kickstarter.
Yeah,
The augmented reality.
yeah. Where do you uh where do you feel like the tabletop space is going to be going in the next like 5 to 10 years?
Kind of a Ready Player One situation,
Mm-hmm.
where you literally have like rigs and stuff set up where people can experience like virtual reality stuff. But a lot of it is going to just be smart devices which are projecting to essentially cybernetics. So contact lenses and things like that, with that sort of stuff in it, um, like a silicone contact lens type situation with circuitry and stuff, or just pinpoint drones which can project images into your eyes and they're just buzzing around you and creating a reality around you. I don't think we're going to have like holographic rooms like in Star Trek, but something where you're walking around and a drone is literally projecting a reality over what you see around you
Mm-hmm.
in real time with cloud computing and stuff, is quite likely, I think.
Well, if we can
We're
get
going
that
to have
0 point energy from Stargate, then we could have a holographic room.
I actually know how that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like Elon Musk's satellite system, for instance, we're only starting to see the impact of that, the Starlink thing,
Mm-hmm.
because that can handle huge amounts of data. So the cloud will be literally a space cloud
Mm-hmm.
of satellites and things. We're going to have smart homes with battery banks and individual power banks and things like that, decentralized power and communications.
Mm-hmm.
So the net will literally be a network of servers and processors that every house is essentially a node of, because we can't have server farms. We need to actually offload some of that server load onto individual houses and stuff. And our computer power that we've got nowadays is just incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can imagine if if YouTube was dispersed across all the computers that use YouTube, so it's a peer-to-peer sharing network as well.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. So yeah, we'll literally have AI, which is generating
Mm-hmm.
environments and things like that, and monsters and stuff for people. That's just going to get more and more pervasive. They've had test cases where they had a large language model which was examining MRI scans of people's brains at the same time that they were looking at images, and it could identify from the MRI scans after a sufficient amount of training
Mm-hmm.
what they were thinking about and looking at.
Yeah.
So in the future, you could literally have a rig on your head which can read what you're thinking,
Yeah.
and be generating images based on your heart's desires and stuff like that. So it's exactly the same as if you're sitting at the table with the DM and you're going, oh man, I hope this doesn't happen. And the DM's like writing notes.
Then the AI DM makes it happen.
It's literally reading your brain and making your wishes come true. Yeah.
Thank you for watching this interview with AJ. This interview ran a little long, and I had to cut it a bit short. If you want to see the rest of the interview, then hop over to our Patreon for the additional content. If you want more content from AJ, then check out his YouTube channel. Links will be in the description below. And if you want to see more from me, then check out the live link on the Ampersandbox channel, or stop by and say hi during one of Ampersandbox's Sunday live streams. And as always, be kind and roll well.